So I'm delighted to introduce, firstly, start with Harriet. This is Dr. Harriet Fildes, and she's the head of the protection programs running the Scottish Human Rights Defender Fellowship and the Human Rights Defender Protective Scholarship at the University of Dundee. She provides specialist support and protection for human rights defenders at risk around the world since 2019 and for journalists since 2015. In addition to guest lecturing and providing training on security and protection management in human rights advocacy at various universities and with CSOs and government, she's been conducting research and policy work on universities as sites of protection, security and safeguarding for temporary relocation of high-risk human rights defenders, and is developing new protection mechanisms, confidence building, resettlement and integration initiatives for human rights defenders in exile. So we feel we can very much learn from Harriet in terms of the agreement that's been signed this morning. Previously, she worked at Bilkent University in Turkey as an associate researcher, as a journalist and foreign policy analyst in Ankara, Turkey, and as tutor at the University of Dundee, Edinburgh and Stirling. Her PhD was from the University of Edinburgh and specialised in civil society impact on foreign policy, international development and conflict resolution. She's been particularly involved in work to research and support civil society organisations operating in oppressive environments, starting with her work with Tibetan refugees and former political prisoners in India. In addition to this, she has experience working on rule of law and conflict mediation and peace-building capacity building projects in Oman and Scotland. Prior to this, she completed an MSc in International Politics at the School of Oriental and African Studies. She has several publications. She's worked at the managing editor for Independent Turkey at the Centre for Research and Policy on Turkey and has been consulted by the BBC, The Times, The Independent and others on her journalism and research. So we're delighted to have her on the panel this morning. We have Fidelma O'Kane. Fidelma is secretary of Save Our Sperrins group, which was set up in 2015 to campaign against a Canadian gold mining company called Dalradian Gold, which has applied for planning permission for a gold mine and processing plant in the Sperrins area, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty in County Tyrone. She is from County Tyrone herself, where she lives with her husband, Cormac McAllister, and they have 4 grown-up sons and 8 young children. Fidelma worked as a social worker for 15 years and as a lecturer for 23 years, and she is now, in theory, retired. We have here Zara Roure. Zara is head of protection in Frontline Defenders. Since 2022, she leads a global team working on the direct response to human rights defenders and organisations at risk for their peaceful and legitimate human rights work. Prior to being with Frontline Defenders, she's collaborated for almost 20 years with local and international organisations, social movements and networks, both as a professional and as an activist collaborating on issues such as tackling inequalities, promoting women's rights, land and environmental rights in Brazil and Latin America. Delighted to have you here. And finally, Dr. Walt Kilroy is co-director of the DCU Conflict Institute and an assistant professor at DCU School of Law and Government. His research and teaching focus on conflict, peace building, peacekeeping, civilian protection and development, and in particular, the interactions between these different processes. He's interested in the way societies deal with the aftermath of armed conflict and the social and political reconstruction which is part of that peace-building process. His research includes the reintegration programs for ex-combatants after the wars in Sierra Leone and Liberia, which was important for the social, economic and political recovery of these societies. And he has a book on that theme called Reintegration of Ex-Competence After Conflict: Participatory Approaches in Sierra Leone and Liberia, which was published in 2015. His PhD was on that topic, and it involved in-depth research with the ex-combatants themselves and the communities they settled in. And it was awarded the Basil Chubb Prize for the from the Political Studies Association of Ireland for the best thesis in political science in Ireland in 2012. His more recent fieldwork has been in South Sudan and Mali, and it focused on protection of civilians by UN peacekeeping operations, and it was funded by the Irish Research Council. He's maintained close engagement with practitioners and policymakers in both development and conflict, and he previously worked in development and in journalism. So we're delighted to have such a wealth of diverse experience in this area for this panel. So the way the panel is going to work is I have one question that I'd like to ask to each of the panelists as a general question, and then we will ask more specific questions about the work that the panelists do.
Sure. I'm going to try to adjust the lighting so that people can see Harriet a little bit better. But so is that? Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my first question is, how can we protect the human rights of environmental defenders? And I'd ask Sarah to
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting us from Frontline Defenders to be here. We are glad to, as has been referred earlier, been launching this new agreement. So I think it's on behalf of human rights, environmental human rights defenders that we share some of our thoughts here. I think for this first question, I was thinking how we break that down in three parts. One is who is an environmental defender, which I think Mary addressed most of that already. But protect from what and protect from whom? So what are we talking about when we are referring to protecting the rights of environmental defenders? So environmental defenders are the likes of Pablo Lopez Alaves, who is a Zapoteca indigenous human rights defender in the southern part of Mexico and who has been detained for 14 years now. He has been unjustly charged with a murder accusation as a reprisal for his work, denouncing the illegal logging within the lands of his community. I met with Pablo last year, and he recently was unfairly tried again, and he has published a letter recently, reiterating his hope that his case would still be able to be reverted as a result of the persistence of those who are supporting him and his own persistence. Environmental defenders are the likes of Mother Nature in Cambodia, a group of environmental activists who have been denouncing the pollution, the contamination of the rivers in Cambodia, the illegal use of the land and the environmental and natural resource in their country. Several of them right now have been criminally charged and are in detention. Environmental defenders are the likes of Nicinia, who in Rondônia, in the Amazon in Brazil in 2018, disappeared to later be found dead next to the river by her relatives. So environmental defenders are the ones who are defending the right to land rights, they are defending the right to food, they're defending the right to clean water, to clean environment. They are working against enforced displacement. They are also defending the right to be consulted about their own territories and how those natural resources to which they relate on a daily basis are also being used. And what are we protecting or should be looking at protecting them for? So environmental defenders, who are often trade unionists, women human rights defenders, migrant workers, they are being targeted with smearing campaigns. They are being targeted with criminal charges, with death threats, with physical attacks. And unfortunately, more often than we would like to see, they are being killed as a result of their work. In a week time, Frontline Defender is going to be launching our 2024 global analysis. And as part of this report, we publish an annual data on the killings of human rights defenders. But we also show other patterns of targeting of different groups of human rights defenders. And in this report, we are going to see once again the group of land rights defenders, indigenous rights defenders, amongst those who are being killed as a result of their work, but also those who are being disproportionately criminalized as a result of their work. And protect from whom? unfortunately, as defenders take the front lines, they are being targeted by private companies who are investing disproportionate amount of money into charge criminally. And so they are spending a lot of money on their own lawyers to charge community leaders, to present charges against indigenous communities, against Afro-descendant communities who are being not only detained, but often forced to pay fees back to those companies who are displacing their communities. They are private companies in different countries. We have documented case in which they invest in large sum of money into private security companies, which are unfortunately using force and attacking and threatening environmental, indigenous, land rights defenders. Those groups of defenders are being targeted by armed groups, paramilitary groups, but also by police force, by the army in different countries. And they are being disproportionately affected by the different environmental issues that we are all facing. But I want to finish this first point just to flag the fact that despite of the different risks that those groups face and their own persistence, but more than that, the fact that they are developing and leading protection strategies for themselves. So environmental defenders, land rights defenders, indigenous rights defenders, they often know the best what are the better strategies to protect themselves. If those strategies are local, if they are regional, if it's about building alliance among different communities, because they know the local context. And more often than we would like, they also know their perpetrators. So just want to bring that element of their agency when we are talking about the protection of environmental defenders.
Very much. Thank you. And to bring a perspective closer to home, I'll ask the same question of Fidelma. How can we protect the human rights of environmental defenders?
Thank you. Okay, so I was reflecting over this past 10 years, and I was able to identify, 9 things that I think helped protect us as environmental defenders. Although when we set out, we didn't see ourselves as environmental defenders. We were just, anti-gold mining. So the common theme through the 9 things was it's about publicity, but it's that, letting people know that we're not just a small campaign against gold mining in the Sperrins. We've learned over the years, we're part of a much bigger global picture that connects extractivism, colonialism, and climate change. And I think, it did take me a couple of years to realise that. Okay, so I'll run through the 9 things. The first one was using media and social media. And, the social media was more straightforward because, we just set up a Facebook page and we have 9,600 followers now. And we have Instagram and I suppose more recently Twitter. But the media, the traditional media of newspaper and radio and TV was harder to break into because the gold mining company has employed 2 PR companies and they're always churning out their propaganda. And the newspapers are local papers. The company would have had full page advertisements for 5 years. And so he who pays the piper calls the tune. But then eventually we have made some inroads there, and even recently we had an article in The Guardian, so that was a big change for us. Networking was the second one, and that was both nationally and internationally. Nationally, whenever we learned that 27% of the Republic of Ireland has been given out in prospecting licences and 25% of the northern 6 counties has been given out in prospecting licences. So a quarter of the whole island is given out there to mining companies. So we started making links with people. Well, and people in other counties have reached out to us, and we have been, to meet with people in Donegal, Cavan, Monaghan, Leitrim, down in Galway, down in Clare, over in Wicklow, and different counties anyhow. And and now we have set up since 2021. we have set up an All-Ireland group called CAIM, CAIM, and it's Communities Against the Injustice of Mining, but apparently CAIM was an Old Irish word for a circle of protection. So we meet on Zoom once a month, and we meet every quarter in person, and we just rotate around the 4 provinces. So that has been really good, nationally and then internationally. We reached out to other countries, and particularly during the COVID time when we learned how to do Zoom, and we we were Zooming all the time. So people in Europe like Spain, Finland, Greece, Romania, and then over in Papua New Guinea, and they didn't even know where it was, Australia, New Zealand, and then in South American countries, Peru, Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, and that. So it was really great because we were learning from them what has happened then, which has been horrific. But it was, they were telling us again, what gold mining does to the water and to air and to land and to people's health, and the strategies that the mining companies use throughout the world. They're all the same. And so, and then again, we had visits from people, from Indigenous people. We had Lakota Indians, Native American Indians. They've come to visit us twice, 2018 and 2023, and that was brilliant. We called it Making Relatives because we felt we had so much in common with them. And then we had Zapatistas from Mexico, and then we had Munduruku people from the Amazon. We've had them twice as well, and they were fighting gold mining. So it's really, amazing just reaching out and then putting that up on social media, having all these, links. Links with NGOs was the number 3 point I jotted down. These are not in any particular order of importance, but just as it came into mind. Friends of the Earth Northern Ireland have been very supportive to us from the beginning. London Mining Network, Yes to Life, No to Mining. MISN, Mining and Justice Solidarity Network in Canada, they've been very helpful to us. Trócaire, that's well known in Ireland, have been very good to us. CAJ is Committee for the Administration of Justice in Belfast, and again, in more recent times, they have been supportive to us. And CELDF, and that's an American group, Community Environmental Legal Defence Fund, and they introduced us to rights of nature and rights of communities, which has been very good. The 4th point was links with trade unions. So we wrote to all the trade unions that we knew, NIPSA, Unison, INTO, Unite, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and all our local trade union councils. And we told them what we were doing and if they'd like us to come and speak to them. And a lot of them have supported us, which has been great. And again, through our members being members of trade unions, that has helped. Number 5 was the election of an independent anti-gold mining councillor to our local council in 2019, at a time when no political party supported us. Not that any does yet, because they often speak out of both sides of their mouth, depending on who they're speaking to. Number 6 was links with frontline defenders, and from 2019 we have been linked with frontline defenders, and we really appreciate it. We're invited to the Dublin platform for human rights defenders at risk. We got a security grant for body cameras and dash cams, which have really been, excellent. Although my husband lost his body camera when he was trying to run away from the gold mining company. We had a visit from Mary Lawler in 2019 and Andrew Anderson from the Frontline Defenders, and it was really great that they came to visit us. We have a protest camp called the GPO with a nod to Irish history, a symbol of resistance, and it's a caravan on the proposed site. So we were honoured with a visit from Mary and Andrew. And we have, and again, I can't even read my own writing. So that number 7 was links with the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, and that was Julia Michovic. I hope I've got said her name right. So from 2020, we've been involved there again, been invited to first of all our online roundtable discussion, and then to a roundtable conference in Dublin. And then when there, our rep met Mary Lawler again and Michelle Forst, who is the UN Special Rapporteur for Environmental Defenders. So we're in with all, the important people that's important to know. And number 8, in 2022, a nun in Cork who was originally from Fermanagh, Sister Magella McCarn, who died last year, unfortunately, she encouraged us, in fact, prodded and pushed us to do a civil society submission to the United Nations. They were doing a universal periodic review of the United Kingdom's record of human rights. So our submission was about violations of human rights arising from the potential gold mine or the proposed gold mine. And it was the first time that we had recorded testimonials from, defenders who had been the subject of abuse. And that was really, it was a very long drawn out process. And it was like doing a dissertation, this submission, but it was well worth it. And again, in that November, when it was being heard, Mary Lawler tweeted about her concerns for human rights defenders in the Sperrins. And I think that caused a few ripples in that. And finally, the 9th one was the Committee for the Administration of Justice. They wrote a report in September 2024. They launched it at Queen's University in Belfast. And they got Michelle Forst to speak at the launch via video link. And the report was called Policing the Protectors, Policing of Environmental Protest in the Sperrins. And alongside that, they produced a Know Your Rights guide to protest in Northern Ireland. So those 9 things have all helped protect us. Now, I can't claim they weren't thought out strategies or anything like that. They all happened over the last 10 years, and we're very lucky, that they did happen. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, Fidelma. I'd ask now Harriet to respond.
Hi, Kevin, hear me? Great. So sorry I couldn't be with you all in person. I have also thought a lot about this question over the past few weeks since it was shared with me. And I think the area I'd like to discuss is the we of how can we protect human rights defenders. And actually Fidelma just did an amazing job of describing the plethora of organizations, of skills, of individuals that it takes to support a movement and to support individual human rights defenders and environmental defenders. We run a temporary relocation program in Scotland that was very much supported and set up by frontline defenders back in 2018. And we have taken a kind of needs-based and holistic approach to how we accompany and support human rights defenders who are at risk. The areas that have come up from time and time again, because frontline defenders are already doing this job. They do it incredibly well around physical security, security and protection management in general, capacity building, training, digital security. The area that I think universities can really come in on, and I assume many of the people in this room are academics and perhaps students, is the coaching and kind of soft skills mentoring. Environmental defenders, they're not heroes. They're not people separate to us. They're individuals who are on the ground, who see a problem in their community and try and change things, and because of that end up in incredible risk. So not only do they have to face day-to-day risks of doing their work, they also have to do everything that we have to do. They have to learn how to write grants. They have to do data collection. They have to do all sorts of, normally quite challenging roles whilst also facing this risk. So frontline defenders are on it in managing their risks. What universities can do is support individual environmental defenders to achieve economic security. You can't be an environmental defender if you don't have your own physical and economic security to enable you to do so. So a few ways that we've done this over the years, and these seem like really simple things, but if we can grow a network of mentors and of particularly academics, but also student activists who are willing to support individuals, then it could be incredibly impactful. We do mentoring around CVs and cover letters, share obviously lots of economic opportunities. Particularly, I am pushing for any grant applications that are remotely affiliated with my project to be put in partnership with human rights defenders. Even things like just a small article in The Guardian, I think again Fidelma mentioned, there's so many individuals that when they meet human rights defenders, they want to write about them, they want to give them visibility, but they don't think to do it collaboratively. There's an easy partnership there where you write your article for The Guardian in partnership, or rather than just using the data and using the stories and the lived experience. So yeah, I think that is the main, well, not even change, it's more that we just need to keep taking forward amazing initiatives that are going on, and academics are really good at this on a singular basis, but we need to join it up and make it a more concrete response. This is arguably the gravest economic situation that environmental defenders or human rights defenders in general have ever faced. So they are going to need a level of flexible support and coaching and mentoring that is not previously perhaps been necessary. I think the other main point, and this is again kind of produced from 5-6 years of learning now, is the impact of human-centered support. When everything is so dehumanized through the grants process, etc., having an individual human being that cares about your well-being and is able to be responsive when you come to, well, when an environmental defender comes to them with a problem or a crisis is incredibly impactful. You need individual protection managers all around the world who are just willing to go that little bit further, perhaps, in making referrals, in providing support, in providing feedback. And I think that can be really impactful for us as well. I think Mary Lawler touched on the hopelessness that we're obviously facing right now, but to be able to help an individual and support them long term, regardless of what your job is so much more, or can be so much more impactful than the attempts to change things systemically. Not that we should stop those, but thinking about our own well-being, I suppose, and working in human rights at the moment, that has been quite important to me. The other thing is, aside from holistic protection and economic security and collaborations, is obviously relocation. So I just wanted to take a note to say I think it's fantastic that DCU are starting this project. Ireland, I would argue, along with Scotland, are probably some of the most secure and safe places where environmental defenders can come to recover. It takes a long time to build up the network of support that defenders need to really integrate in society and to ensure that their long-term protection comes from these opportunities. So I suppose I'd just promote that everyone in this room thinks about what expertise that they have, and also what interest they have, that they might be able to provide pastoral support or peer mentoring to defenders who come through this programme. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you. I'd like to hand to Walt now, and perhaps you might also talk about both Fidelma and Harriet have mentioned the role of the media. Perhaps you might also touch on the role of traditional media in this.
Great. Thanks very much. And thanks for the invitation to speak. As usual, I'm not sure what I have to contribute, given that... A bit closer. Okay. I'm not sure what I have to contribute, in that it is the human rights defenders themselves who know the context and know what they need, and we need to listen to them, and of course to the people who've done the amazing work over the years in protecting human rights defenders. But these are a few of my thoughts. The two things that come to mind are voice and visibility. And we need to listen very carefully to those who are involved, because of course those things can also be the source of danger. And in terms of voice, we can help people to find their voice, to use their voice, to amplify that, and to try and make sure that it's heard without imposing our own message on top. And visibility, again, it's very much a double-edged sword. Visibility can be a form of protection. If somebody has a higher profile, they may be less likely to be targeted, but at the same time, it may also ensure that they are targeted. So we need to listen very carefully. And I think it was Harriet who used the word partnership, and work very much in partnership with those who are directly involved. We also need to think very much in terms, as well as, we talk about capacity building, which of course is not a one-way street. We can learn so much as well, in addition to those who are trying to defend and protect. But as well as all of the traditional capacity building, the skills, the resources, we also need to be very aware of the psychological and emotional needs, because activism can come at an enormous emotional cost and psychological cost. And here we shouldn't forget that our secret weapon may in fact be hope. Hope and the fact that we just don't go away. And those things need to be sustained through a number of different means. We have networking, we can help with networking opportunities. We have connections that we may take for granted. Also, it's very important to see this holistically and remember that we have that all of these actions and individuals are working as part of a strange kind of an ecosystem. So, as well as the environmental human rights defenders themselves, there may be individuals or institutions or groups or professions that are directly or indirectly protecting them. Media in the countries in which they operate, the legal system, the access to justice, education, and the whole general idea of good governance and accountability. By working on those, we may also be increasing the space or making the space safer for environmental human rights defenders to operate, because they are operating. We are all operating in a kind of an ecosystem, the web that Mary reminded us to be aware of. And the last one is just to do a conflict analysis, coming from my own background in terms of conflict, to see like who are the actors, what are their interests, what are the relationships between them, and remember that these are dynamic and changing. And we may find that there are allies in unexpected places. To be very careful about looking at things in terms of black and white. Who are the goodies, who are the baddies? We always imagine we're the goodies, of course. We have our own psychological needs too, and we should be aware of those. And we need to be aware, when are we meeting our own psychological needs, perhaps including our own need to vent anger and outrage, and when are we actually doing something useful. So to do our conflict analysis and to see where are the connections and where are the overlaps. You can be in favor of environmental protection and climate action quite simply from the perspective of self-interest. It isn't always the people who we imagine are the human rights defenders are automatically are the only allies. We may find allies in unexpected places. We may find allies in business. We may find allies in professions who simply want things to be able to run sustainably and operate. So to do a very careful conflict analysis. In terms of media, this was the second question.
I think we're going to bring up questions from the audience.
Oh, okay.
Time for that.
Okay, that's great. So would you want me to do the second question very briefly now, or we just move on? I think I'm sure there are some great views in the audience too.
Yeah, maybe very quick.
Okay, very briefly. So just drawing on my background in terms of media. Again, I'm going to use the word ecosystem. We often have an idea of we need to get the media to do what we want them to do, which is to shove the ideas and the stories and the issues down a pipeline. And at the receiving end, there's a passive audience who will who will consume whatever the media gives them. It's much more like an ecosystem. People choose what they read, scroll through, or listen to. And we need to be sure that we can find ways to engage the audience. The media, again, may be, and I would have many criticisms, but we may find that the media who we love to bash are actually constrained by what the viewers or listeners or readers are interested in, can identify with, can make sense of, can understand. And if we don't understand that relationship, really we're wasting our time. And ways to engage people, again, there are the underlying issues that we want people to be aware of, but ultimately what people identify with are personal stories, and images and examples that they can understand. And we need to be very clever in understanding how to make use of those personal stories, how to make it real through images, through examples, and through narratives, because this is how human beings operate.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So I'd like now to invite questions from the audience. Yes?
So let's get the mic from. My question is for Fidelma, and I just think you could write an instruction manual on how to build alliances, but I'm kind of curious about the alliances that you may not want to make, because I've noticed in rural areas that there's a lot of more right-wing actors who are kind of aligning with these anti-development movements, like at the likes of AINTU are becoming more active in the space and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering how your group has navigated that.
Yeah, we encountered that back about 2020, 2021. I suppose there were people associating with us and started to use our name, Save Our Sperrins, and they were in Dublin and down below a few counties, and they suppose they had latched on to the anti-gold mining movement, and then in our own local area, people that we knew, were into the conspiracy theories, and it was really, it was very difficult time, and so we decided, I think it was around Easter 2021, that we had a meeting about it, and with a number of other anti-mining groups across the Sperrins, and we decided that we would issue a statement saying that our focus was the gold mining, and that purely the gold mining. We weren't getting involved in any other debate about, about whether there was COVID, whether we were being sprayed from the air, someone told us, whether, what else, flat earth was another one. And all it was just, terrible, like, and it was people we knew too. So, um, it was terrible. As my neighbour, I shouldn't be going into it, but he rang and he said, "Are you inside or outside?" And it was during lockdown, and I said, "I'm inside." And he says, "Go out and look up." And I went out and I looked up, and he says, "Take your phone." And I said, "What is it?" He says, "They're spraying us." And I said, "Oh no, it's just an airplane, you know." And he said, "No, no, no, they're spraying us." And he said, "An engineer, like." And I said, "Well, what can we do about it?" And he says, "Nothing." I says, "Well, then we shouldn't worry about it." Uh, Well, so we just issued that statement. Now we'd got abuse. We did get some abuse, and some people departed from us, but we were quite glad, about that. So, I suppose we're very suspicious, of people's motives, and that. But we just by just differentiating ourselves and just focusing solely on the gold mining, which is difficult, too, because we are sympathetic to a number of other causes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. There's a roving mic making its way to you.
Thanks a million. Fidelma, I was hearing listening. I feel that very powerful in you, that the listening, because I think we do need to listen to different voices and hear the madness and stay in the madness and somehow or other find some way. My question is for sorry, the last speaker, Walt. Walt. It was around. I like that notion of do your own conflict analysis. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that? Because I think that's really important as humans to be able to build society as opposed to an economy. I feel we're tussling all the time to be people in the world, and then have these political and economic levers to enable us to connect and do what we need to do as humans. I think we've got. So help me. Thank you.
To take that one, yes.
That's great. Thanks very much for the question. Yeah, I probably we all do conflict analysis in our heads all the time. When I'm talking about conflict to students, I say to them, actually, we're all experts in conflict. We all deal with conflict all the time. Hopefully, it's not of a destructive kind. We're all used to managing it, and those are skills that we can always develop. But the idea of a conflict analysis is to work out well, who are the actors here, and it may be that there are actors that we take for granted or are invisible to us. Like list out who are the actors. Then work out what are their interests. And then work out, well, what are the incompatibilities between different interests? I mean, sometimes things are a zero-sum game, and either like there is mining or there isn't, but sometimes you may find that the incompatibility between the interests between those two groups, maybe it's one where there can be an imaginative solution between them. And then to work out what are the relationships between them. And of course, these are dynamic and these change over time. So try to work out like what are the underlying causes of a conflict or a dispute? What are the triggers that set it off, and what are the things that are more immediate that we can work on? And the best example I heard of was somebody, rather than writing this and then printing it off and laminating it, recognizing that it's very dynamic, that they had in their office, they had one of those, probably gone out of fashion now, with these felt boards where you can move them around. And like everybody who'd come into his or her office to get something signed or to check about something, they'd look at the thing and say, oh yeah, I would have put that group a little bit closer to there. So it was constantly changing. Everybody had an opinion to offer, some useful, some maybe not. And in that as well, we need to be very aware. Often, as I say, we all, like, as those who are working for change, we have psychological needs too. We need to be upfront about that. We need hope. We need to see results. We may feel outrage and anger, which are very tricky ones. How to mobilize those and how not to let those take over are really important. We need solidarity, between each other, and to foster that. And again, that's another relationship building exercise, or at least an awareness of those relationships. But we need to see results, and we need to bear in mind, often we want to see results immediately. I'm not going to suggest for a moment that we're not in an absolute crisis in terms of sustainability and climate, and in terms of the situation we see in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Sudan, in so many places. I'm not going to suggest for a moment that these aren't urgent needs, but so many of the needs and issues we're dealing with, that they're urgent, but also the more sustainable solutions are going to be long term, and we need to be here. We need to be here for the long run, and we also need to look after our own needs.
Thanks. Do we have time for? Yeah. Yes. Another couple of questions. Might go over here. Yes.
Thank you so much. I was really happy to hear psychology mentioned a few times today. So I am a committee member of the Psychological Society of Ireland, and it's something that has been fairly recently developed in Ireland. And we are very much looking to see how we can be part of the conversation about how we look at some of the things that people have mentioned today. And I think particularly what you talked about, Mary, about what in the private space of our own minds, what do we all really think and sometimes not say? And sometimes, like you, Fidelma, you find out new things about your neighbour that you didn't know and you have to navigate. So there's a lot of knowledge that's there within the space of psychology that should be out in the wider world a little bit more obviously for people to use almost as a toolkit. So I'd encourage anyone that would like to link in with that group in particular. I'd be more than happy to chat later as well. And there's lots of other things you've mentioned where there's frameworks and theories around this, around social tipping points when you get up to, there's different percentages that make that shift for people. And there's also theories around collective efficacy, around what we can all do when each of us does one thing together. And then there's things like social contagion, where, Fidelma, anyone who listened to you speak today, that's this beautiful exchange of energy between people that makes people compelled to want to work with you and do something with you. And that's often, it's kind of pitched as something quite negative generally, or a very sort of niche environmental identity, but it's inside all of us in terms of what we all think and how we connect with each other and ourselves. So please do get in touch if anyone would like to talk a bit more.
Thank you for sharing that. Any further questions? Yes.
Thanks. I'm really interested in the alliance building that you all have been able to do and the structures and systems that have been created that activists are able to kind of leverage and call on in order to do their work as best they can. But at the same time, I have fear of those systems and structures as well, and the ways that our society is built on a presumption of constant growth and how that is in conflict with environmental protection and human rights defense. And I'm wondering if any of you have examples of groups, individuals, successful campaigns that give us a sense of what it might look like to reshape and rethink some of those systems in a more fundamental way. Like where is sort of the limit of how much we can work within the systems and how much do we need to be really thinking critically outside of them?
I don't know if Harriet or anybody wants to come in there, or Zara.
Yeah, I can come in briefly. I'm not sure I fully got the question, but I think it was the limits of alliance building, essentially. One of the
I think it was also about how much could you work within the structures and how much do you need to challenge the underlying assumptions of values.
One of the challenges we face, I suppose, as a protection organisation is, and actually Walt touched on this as well, everything has to be done in partnership with human rights defenders and based on their needs. But actually, human rights defenders are not very good at understanding and ensuring their own protection, often prioritising their work, their impact, their communities far above and beyond their own protection. So there's a responsibility there as well, whilst offering opportunities also to show a lot of caution, to make sure that they're really thinking through their own security and protection in that. We have just started engaging with businesses and we're doing a lot of consultation with defenders on that, because what we want to avoid is obviously being utilised for greenwashing or any kind of washing. There is also a conversation that is being had by our alumni community, which acts as a kind of separate entity and has its own chair, on whether we will continue to engage with the UK government because of the situation in Palestine. We are kind of, human rights defenders tend to be performatively put out to various events to show the credentials of a state in human rights. And there comes a point, I suppose, where a decision has to be made to disengage, despite the potential impacts of these alliances. So yeah, I suppose that was a bit of a non-answer in that the point is that we are having the conversations, but we have not made any decisions yet.
You come in there as well, so.
Yeah, maybe just two brief comments. I think it's a very good question and definitely not one answer for that. But I just want to mention two things in that. One is, I think there are broader strategies to change structures that we don't always name as protection strategies, but they are part of the protection of environmental defenders. So, for example, when we look at the right to free, prior, then informed consent, so the idea that communities need to be consulted, and that's regulated by the Convention 169 of ILO. Communities need to be consulted by any presence of operation of different business within their own territory. So how that consent is implemented, how communities are able to engage in a fair way. So we don't always name that as part of a protection strategy, but often what we see is people are being targeted because they're claiming that right to be consulted prior to the operation of a business. Or even when we're looking at the weakening of environmental regulations in different countries, that's very important, because if there is weaker regulation, weaker land rights, so people who are defending those rights are more exposed to it. So I think there is that element of how we look at the structure and look at the protection within that as a two sides of a similar coin. But one last point in terms of the strategies, I think in this particular moment, when we are discussing climate and environment, not everything that brings the label green is helping environmental defenders. Very often, those things are putting those defenders at risk. One short example, the defender I mentioned at the beginning, Isinia, who was disappeared and later found dead in the Amazon, she was fighting against the flooding of huge areas where her community used to live as a result of the operations of a mega hydroelectric dam, which is presented as a clean energy and is the main energy source in the country where I come from. So I think it's just important for us to see that not everything that comes with a label is necessarily the thing that's helpful, and not everything that's not associated with protection is not relevant. It might be something we want to call on that space as well.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah. So sorry, Walt. Apology. Yeah.
If we have, yeah, I know we're up against the clock, but just in terms of an example that's interesting that I think we can learn from. It's a very specific one, so I'm not going to suggest for a moment it's just something that can be copied and pasted or scaled up. But I think there's still, even 10 years on, next year is the 10th anniversary. 10 years on, there are interesting things we can learn from the experience, and it's the referendum on marriage equality in Ireland in 2015. And for me, it was a very, very interesting process to be involved in. One of the things that I think was most interesting was that, and of course, it was for a very specific time. It wasn't a long-term thing. There was a sense of urgency. There was going to be voting on those days. So on that day, so like, thinking about doing it in 6 months didn't come into it, so people could focus. But whatever happened, to use the social contagion or the tipping point idea, and as Mary says, these changes are often non-linear. Things happen. You work away for years, and then suddenly there's change. Or maybe not, but that a lot of what happened was actually spontaneous. It looked very organized from the outside, but there was a huge amount. There was this kind of tipping point where things were happening spontaneously. Groups were set up all over the country, like specific interest groups. Parents got involved. One of the most interesting ones was, I believe it was a group of students in Trinity who came up with the idea that one of the main determinants in how you were going to vote in terms of marriage equality, it wasn't education or class or even urban rural, none of those things. It was simply age. And the students in Trinity came up with this brilliant idea, which was replicated. It really went viral. Was that you would have LGBT students or young people phoning their grandmother or their grandfather. It was called Phone Your Granny, #PhoneYourGranny. It was absolutely ingenious. And you saw these really moving videos being posted of young people phoning their grandmother, "Hi, Granny, how are you? I'm gay. I want to meet somebody and it's going to be a guy. And it's really important how you vote." And you have these really extraordinary exchanges being put out on social media. Again, it was a personal story. it involved emotions, and it was something that came up spontaneously and could be replicated easily. And one of the key things from that campaign, apart from like the way people worked together spontaneously, was from the very outset, it was very clear that the tone of the campaign was going to be very important. You know, do we engage in being the victim, in anger, in outrage, or do we try and get people, or do we give people the opportunity to be part of a positive story that where their agency, where they go and put an X in this box or in this box, or don't go to the polling station at all, is part of a psychological process of being part of something positive and happy. And how that was engineered and how that was used and put into effect is, I think, something we can learn from.
Thank you. So we have time for one final question. Yes.
Well, I think that Tara answered part of my question already, but I was wondering if you all think that we as civil society or academics or this context here are somehow distracted by some trends on climate change issues, like focusing too much on carbon pricing or energy transition when there are things happening on the ground. And I mean, uh, DCU Institute is for climate and society, but it's not a critic. It's just that I could not help to notice that the image in a banner is like a wind turbine. So I mean, it feels like we are, of course, this is important, but do you feel that in this context here, that we are somehow distracted by it?
Anyone wants to come in first there? Sarah?
Yeah, I am very curious to see Mary's next report because, and I think was very thoughtful that she launched the call for submissions around the particular issue of defenders targets in the space of green transition, because I think that's going to reveal diverse ways in which people in different parts of the world engage around that issue. And I think different perspectives are extremely relevant in that space. But I think there are historical different traditions, even in the way the framing and the language around environmental rights have been shaped in different parts of the world. And I think that's important to be acknowledged when we are looking at what we are missing right now, which is more multilateral discussions around climate and environment. Of course, when we are looking at the environmental defenders, land rights, indigenous defenders, for me, there is something really strong on their own experience and on the ways which they are being targeted because of the work that they are doing, that for me reveals some of those ambiguities that we're navigating in that space as well. I mean, there are different. This week, a friend that I know for many years sent me a message saying, "Oh, we have been working on this campaign for the right to food, etc., etc." And I never imagined that could be so dangerous. And she was telling me that this very grassroots group that's engaged on access to food, that you would imagine is not something controversial, is actually happening to be very risky to her, the group of people who are involved. So what I'm trying to say here is sometimes the labeling of green transition or climate justice don't always unpack what are the different ambiguities that we navigate in those space. But in our experience, I think that the experience and the voice of human rights defenders and the specific risks that they face, for me, tells that story in a different way from a different point of view.
Thank you. Whether you were coming up or car.
No, sorry, I think Sarah got it all there.
Thanks. Just very briefly, I think we need to be careful that we don't create, dichotomies that don't really exist. The kind of work that we're all involved in, there are many actors, there are many approaches, there are many parts of the problem. We should think in terms of, complexity theory and systems thinking. There isn't any one solution, and we should be really careful about people, which could be ourselves, who unintentionally sow division by saying, instead of doing this, we should be doing this. No, instead of that, we should give all our effort to this. It's going to take many actors and many actions and many perspectives, long-term and short-term, and to be really careful about those who evangelize for one single solution, because it's a much more complex problem than that.
Yeah, just before we finish, just to check, I suppose, or invite if Fidelma or Harriet wanted to, if there's anything short that you wanted to add before we finish up.
I suppose I know that one of the other possible questions, was about the impacts, but I was thinking that maybe people here wouldn't be aware that some of the things that we have faced in terms of death threats, murder bids, just physical attacks, cyberbullying, being followed at night, sex calls, threatening phone calls, etc., that all has happened to us.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And Harriet?
Yeah, thank you. I touched on this briefly before, but I think as parting words, the economic security aspect of HRD protection and environmental defenders protection is imperative right now. Obviously, there is no way to fill the gap caused by the US funding freeze, and also there's Dutch, UK, etc. Everyone knows the story. But I suppose, given the likely range of people in the room, and I really appreciated the participant who mentioned the Psychological Support Alliance that could potentially provide work, is to think through, no matter what your role, no matter where you're based, if you're applying for grants, if there are economic opportunities that could potentially benefit defenders, to contact frontline defenders who has a massive network, or DCU as they're building yours, or even myself. And just think of them, and what might be a really small amount of money to you could go a long way. I'm trying to currently make sure that any speaking or policy opportunities that I facilitate through my network are paid opportunities, even if it's just £50 or £100. So yes, money. Defenders need money to be able to continue doing their work. So helping them find that is a really important task for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. So that just leaves me to say a really sincere thank you to our panelists, Fidelma O'Kane, Zara Durrell, Walt Kilroy, and Harriet Fildes. And I suppose for me, what comes from all the speakers on the panel is the importance of thinking about the individual human rights activist, the individual, their motivations, the complexity, the dilemmas, and really their humanity, which I think is a word that has come up from all speakers this morning. So thank you very much.